I woke up to the soft golden light spilling through my window and the quiet hum of the morning birds outside my room. I stretched and felt the familiar weight of anticipation and unease in my chest. Today was supposed to be different. My family had called me late last night with an urgent request. A wedding, a grand celebration filled with laughter, music, and endless chatter. And they had planned to make me the babysitter for 15 children, from tiny toddlers clinging to their mother's skirts to older kids with mischievous grins and sticky fingers. They said it would be easy. They said it would be fun. They said it was my duty. But as I sipped my coffee and stared out at the gentle sway of the trees, I knew in my heart that today I needed to rewrite the script of my life. I needed to step away from the roles that had been carved for me long before I had the courage to say no. 15 children would swarm around me like a storm of energy, demanding attention, affection, discipline, and endless patience. And I felt the familiar knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. I had tried before to please everyone, to bend myself into shapes that fit their expectations, to smile and nod while my own dreams sat quietly in the corner of my mind. And today, I realized I could not be everyone to everyone else. I had promised myself that I would not drown in someone else's chaos, that I would honor my own plans, my own voice, my own freedom. And as I glanced at the neatly folded dress I had planned to wear for a solo afternoon with my camera in the park, a gentle warmth of relief spread through me. The sun outside seemed to agree, casting long, gentle shadows across the floor and whispering promises of possibility. I imagined the children running wild with laughter in the vast halls of the wedding venue, their tiny hands grasping at ribbons, flowers, and confetti, and I imagined myself slipping out of that whirlwind into a quiet corner of my own world, a world where I could breathe, where I could laugh at my own thoughts, where I could be the girl who loved sunsets and the smell of wet earth after rain. The thought made me smile, despite the pulse of guilt that tried to creep in like a shadow around my heart. My family would be disappointed. They would question my choice. They would insist that duty and loyalty mattered more than dreams. But I had learned that I could not pour from an empty cup. I had learned that love for oneself was the first act of courage and the most radical form of kindness. And so I began to change my plans. I sent a message with careful words chosen to soften the blow, explaining that I could not take on the responsibility that day, that my own commitments called to me louder than any request from the past. And as I hit send, a strange sense of liberation swept through me like a tidal wave that left me breathless and trembling, yet strangely serene. I packed my bag with my camera and a notebook and a few sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, and I stepped outside into the warm embrace of the day. The city hummed around me, the streets alive with people moving with purpose and care. And somewhere far away, the wedding would begin without me. And I felt the sweet taste of independence mingling with the bitter pangs of guilt that always seemed to arrive uninvited. But I refused to let them anchor me down. I walked through the streets, imagining the stories of each child at the wedding, imagining the chaos I had avoided, the tears, the spilled drinks, the laughter that turned into cries. And I felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness for the missed moments of connection, and relief for the moments I had preserved for myself. And I realized in that quiet reflection that life was not just about the responsibilities that others imposed on us. It was also about the choices we made to honor ourselves, to create space for our own joy. And the wedding, with all its grandeur and chaos, was happening, but so was I. My own story unfurling slowly like the petals of a flower touched by sunlight. And in that realization, I felt the subtle beauty of rebellion, the kind that is gentle and firm, the kind that does not shout, but whispers with unwavering confidence. And so I continued walking, feeling the wind brush against my face, the warmth of the sun across my shoulders, the world opening up before me like a story waiting to be written, a story where I was allowed to breathe, to dream, to wander, and to simply be. And somewhere in the midst of all this freedom, I felt a quiet connection to the little girl I once was, the one who dreamed of adventure and refused to be boxed in by expectations, who found magic in ordinary moments, who understood that saying no was not a betrayal, but a declaration of self-respect. And as I reached the park with its sprawling green lawns and the soft scent of flowers blooming in hidden corners, I knew I had made the right choice. The world seemed larger and softer and more inviting than it had in years. And as I set up my camera on a quiet bench, I caught sight of a squirrel darting through the grass, a child chasing a butterfly, a dog bounding after a ball. And I felt the pulse of life around me, the endless possibilities, the quiet joy, the subtle reminders that happiness often lies in small decisions, in moments where we dare to listen to our own hearts. And so I breathed deeply, feeling the weight lift from my shoulders, feeling the tension melt from my chest. And in that perfect slice of time, I promised myself that I would honor these choices, even when guilt knocked, even when doubt whispered, even when family expectations tried to pull me back into their familiar orbit. Today, I had chosen myself, and I would remember this moment forever. The sound of laughter in the distance, the rustle of leaves, the warmth of sunlight, the quiet heartbeat of a world that was wide open and waiting. And in that space, I felt whole and alive and ready to live fully, without apology. The morning had stretched into afternoon, and the sun now hung high, casting a golden glow over everything around me. I wandered through the park, letting my thoughts drift like autumn leaves caught in a gentle breeze. I watched children play from a distance, their laughter ringing clear like tiny bells in the quiet world I had carved for myself. Today, I was free from expectations, free from the weight of responsibility that had threatened to crush me yesterday. Yet, in this freedom, there was a subtle ache, a longing that I could not quite name. It was the tug of what I had left behind. The wedding, the chaos, the 15 children who would scream, cry, and cling, and who would have expected me to be everything to everyone at once. I shook the thought away and focused on the beauty around me. The sunlight dappled through the branches of the old oaks, casting shifting patterns on the grass, and the breeze carried the soft scent of flowers mingled with the earthy aroma of damp soil. And I felt a surge of gratitude for these small details that often went unnoticed in the rush of life. I settled onto a worn wooden bench with my camera resting on my lap and my notebook open beside me, and I let myself breathe fully, without interruption, without obligation, without the invisible chains of duty pressing down on my shoulders. I took out a small sketch of the park I had done weeks ago and compared it to the living scene before me, and marveled at how life moved constantly yet remained achingly familiar. The squirrels darted across the paths, the pigeons cooed softly, and somewhere a child squealed with delight at the flutter of a butterfly. And I realized that even in the absence of the chaos I had avoided, there was life moving all around me. Life that was messy, imperfect, unpredictable, yet beautiful in its own way. I began to write my thoughts in my notebook, describing the feeling of freedom, the pulse of air against my skin, the weightlessness of a day spent for myself rather than for others. And with every word, I felt layers of tension peel away, revealing a version of myself I had almost forgotten. The girl who had once dreamed of adventure, the woman who craved quiet moments, the person who needed space to breathe and think and create. And as I wrote, I remembered the messages I had sent to my family earlier that morning, the polite refusals, the carefully chosen words meant to soften the blow of my absence at the wedding. And I felt a pang of guilt mixed with relief. Guilt for the disappointment I had caused, and relief for the courage I had mustered to honor my own needs. And in that complex swirl of emotion, I understood something fundamental about life. It was never simply about pleasing others. It was about finding a balance between what was expected and what was essential for your own well-being. And in that balance, there was a quiet kind of victory, a recognition that your own heart mattered just as much as anyone else's. I looked around the park, noticing the way the sunlight shifted across the grass, the subtle dance of shadows and light, and I imagined the wedding unfolding miles away, the children running in chaos, the adults smiling politely while secretly panicking over spilled drinks and missing shoes, and I allowed myself a small laugh at the absurdity of it all. It was not my chaos, not my responsibility, and yet I had once believed it had been my duty to manage it all single-handedly. I closed my eyes for a moment and let the warmth of the sun seep into my skin, the gentle breeze brushing my hair, the quiet hum of life surrounding me, and I felt a deep sense of connection to everything and nothing at once. The paradox of freedom, the strange beauty of solitude, the recognition that sometimes saying no was the bravest thing you could do. And as I opened my eyes, I saw a young couple walking hand in hand, a little dog bouncing beside them, and I realized that life had its own rhythm, a rhythm that did not need my approval or participation to flourish. And that understanding brought a sense of peace that I had not felt in years. It was a peace born from choice, from awareness, from the acceptance that I could step aside from one story to live another, and that stepping aside did not diminish me. It allowed me to grow, to breathe, to experience the world on my own terms. And as I wandered deeper into the park, the trees thickening around a quiet pond, I saw reflections of the sky and the branches and myself in the water, the image rippling with every movement, a constant reminder that life was never static, and neither was I. And in that reflection, I recognized the subtle power of today, the power of choosing oneself, the power of stepping away from chaos, the power of embracing the quiet beauty of being fully alive. And as I sat by the pond, sketching the ripples on the water, the movements of ducks gliding effortlessly across the surface, I felt the edges of my anxiety soften, the familiar ache in my chest dissolve, and a warm light of hope spread through me, a light that whispered that there would be more days like this, more moments where I could claim the world for myself, more instances where I could say yes to my own heart without guilt or hesitation. And I knew that tomorrow I would face the world with renewed strength, renewed clarity, because I had remembered the importance of my own voice and my own choices. And that realization was a gift, the kind that lingered long after the sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving a sky painted with hues of pink and gold, a sky that mirrored the quiet triumph I carried in my chest, a triumph that had nothing to do with weddings or babysitting or anyone else's expectations, but everything to do with the reclaiming of myself. And in that quiet triumph, I felt the stirring of dreams I had long set aside, dreams of travel, of adventure, of connection, of creating something wholly mine, and I felt the courage to follow them, the courage to take the steps that would lead me into a life that honored my desires as much as my responsibilities. And somewhere in the distance, I could hear laughter carried on the wind, a reminder that the world was full of joy, even in chaos and even in solitude. And I smiled, knowing that I had chosen wisely, knowing that I had taken the first step toward a future that would be fully mine. And as the light of the afternoon shifted to the soft gold of early evening, I packed my things, slowly, deliberately, savoring each moment, each sound, each sensation, the world around me alive with possibility, and I walked back through the park, the path familiar yet changed in my perception, as if I had never truly seen it before, as if seeing it now through the lens of self-respect and choice made every tree, every leaf, every whisper of wind feel alive and sacred. And in that sacredness, I felt a quiet promise to myself that no matter what tomorrow held, I would remember today, the day I chose myself, the day I honored my own heart, the day I stepped away from expectation to embrace possibility, the day that reminded me that life was not just to be endured, but to be fully lived, with courage, with awareness, and with love for the person I had always needed to be. The evening had begun to settle over the city. the sun melting slowly into the horizon, painting the sky with shades of crimson, gold, and violet. And I walked through the quiet streets, feeling the gentle hum of the world beneath my feet, the air crisp with the promise of night and the lingering warmth of day. The distant sounds of life mingling with the whispering wind, brushing softly against my skin. And in that moment, I felt a profound stillness, a pause in the relentless motion of existence, where every heartbeat seemed to echo with meaning, and I reflected on the choices that had brought me here. The decision to step away from the wedding, to refuse the chaos, to honor my own plans, to embrace the simple, unadorned freedom that had seemed so elusive for so long. And as I moved through the familiar paths, I thought of the children who would have been under my care today, and I imagined the laughter, the tears, the boundless energy that would have demanded every ounce of my attention. And I felt a subtle pang of sorrow for the moments I would not witness. Yet I knew deep in my heart that my presence in that storm would not have served me or them. It would have drained me, leaving only fragments of patience and affection. And so I let the thought drift like a feather on the wind, choosing instead to focus on the gift of solitude, the rare treasure of a day spent fully in my own company. And I walked past the park where I had spent the afternoon, the memories of the golden light, the rippling pond, the gentle conversations of the birds, and the distant laughter of children still vivid in my mind. And I realized that sometimes absence is not a void, but a space for reflection, a space for growth, a space to remember that the world continues with or without our participation, and yet our choices define how we experience it. And as night began to fall, the street lamps flickered on, casting pools of soft amber light that danced across the pavement, and I felt the quiet pulse of the city beneath me, the subtle rhythm of life moving steadily onward. And I paused to look at the stars, beginning to emerge one by one, scattered across the indigo sky. And I felt a sense of wonder that stretched beyond words, beyond thought, beyond the small anxieties and worries that had once consumed me. And I understood that this was the life I had sought, the life I had chosen, not in grand gestures or loud proclamations, but in small, deliberate acts of self-respect, of courage, of listening to my own heart. And I thought of the times when my family had asked too much, when expectations had weighed heavily, when I had bent and folded myself into shapes that were not my own. And I recognized that those moments had shaped me, yes, but they had not defined me. They had not dictated the terms of my existence. I had reclaimed the narrative, and in doing so, I felt a strength that was quiet yet unshakable, like the roots of an ancient tree buried deep in the soil, drawing nourishment from unseen places, sustaining life above ground. And I continued to walk the streets, familiar yet transformed in my perception, noticing the smallest details, the flicker of light on a window pane, the distant sound of a violin playing somewhere in an open apartment, the way the leaves shimmered in the soft glow of the lampposts, the scent of bread baking from a nearby bakery. And I realized that beauty existed in all forms, even in the ordinary, even in the unnoticed, and that noticing it was itself an act of gratitude, an act of presence, an act of love for oneself. And I felt a surge of joy that was quiet but profound, joy that filled the spaces where worry and doubt had once resided. And I let myself smile freely, letting it curve across my lips, letting it reach the depths of my chest. And in that smile, I recognized the life I had fought for, the moments I had seized, the courage I had summoned. And I knew that this was only the beginning, the first chapter of countless days where I could live fully, without apology, without fear, without compromise. And as I approached the quiet edge of the city, where the streets opened to the river, I paused to watch the water flow gently, reflecting the fading light like liquid gold. And I thought of all the possibilities that stretched before me, the adventures waiting to be taken, the stories waiting to be written, the people waiting to be met. And I felt a sense of anticipation so profound it was almost tangible, like electricity in the air, ready to ignite the next chapter of my life. The river flowed steadily, as if carrying away the remnants of fear and doubt, the fragments of expectation, the weight of others' opinions, leaving me lighter, freer, ready to embrace the unknown. And I knew that choosing myself had not been easy, not without guilt, not without resistance, but it had been necessary, essential, vital for the person I was becoming. And as I stood there, watching the sun disappear fully behind the horizon and the first stars blinked awake, I felt a deep sense of peace, a feeling that whispered, "You are enough. You are whole. You are alive." And that whispered courage echoed through every fiber of my being, filling me with warmth and possibility. And I began to walk along the riverbank, feeling the soft crunch of gravel beneath my feet, the gentle brush of cool air against my skin. And with every step, I felt more present, more grounded, more connected to the world and to myself. I thought of my own dreams, the ones I had tucked away to care for others, the ones I had set aside to fulfill duties that were not mine. And I felt the stirrings of those dreams awakening, like seeds waiting for rain, like embers waiting for air. And I promised myself that I would nurture them, that I would water them with attention and intention, that I would honor them as much as I honored the world around me. And the city hummed softly around me, carrying the voices of distant strangers, the rustle of leaves, the murmur of the river, blending into a symphony that spoke directly to my soul. And I realized that life was not about controlling every detail. It was about presence, awareness, engagement in the beauty of the moment, in the courage to make choices, in the willingness to embrace both joy and uncertainty. And I felt a profound gratitude for the lessons I had learned, for the mistakes that had taught me resilience, for the moments of fear that had revealed strength, for the quiet victories that had shown me the power of self-love. And as darkness settled fully over the city, lights shimmering like constellations within reach, I felt a tenderness for myself, the kind of tenderness reserved for those who have faced their own shadows and emerged still standing, still breathing, still dreaming. And I walked along the river, knowing that the wedding had gone on without me, the children had played their part, the chaos had unfolded as it would, and yet I had carved a path of my own, one that honored my desires, my peace, my dreams. And I realized that freedom was not about escaping responsibilities. It was about choosing which responsibilities mattered and which could be left behind. And I felt a lightness in that recognition, a buoyancy in my step as I continued my solitary walk through the city, my eyes catching the reflections of streetlights on the water, the faint glow of distant windows, the occasional laughter carried from some hidden gathering. And I thought of how many times I had silenced my own needs for the sake of others, how many times I had believed duty was all that mattered, how many times I had bent and folded myself into shapes that were not my own. And I recognized that those moments had shaped me, yes, but they had not defined me. They had not dictated the terms of my existence. I had reclaimed the narrative. And in doing so, I felt a strength that was quiet yet unshakable, like the roots of an ancient tree buried deep in the soil, drawing nourishment from unseen places, sustaining life above ground. And I continued to walk the streets, familiar yet transformed in my perception, noticing the smallest details, the flicker of light on a window pane, the distant sound of a violin playing somewhere in an open apartment, the way the leaves shimmered in the soft glow of the lampposts, the scent of bread baking from a nearby bakery. And I realized that beauty existed in all forms, even in the ordinary, even in the unnoticed, and that noticing it was itself an act of gratitude, an act of presence, an act of love for oneself. And I felt a surge of joy that was quiet but profound, joy that filled the spaces where worry and doubt had once resided. And I let myself smile freely, letting it curve across my lips, letting it reach the depths of my chest. And in that smile, I recognized the life I had fought for, the moments I had seized, the courage I had summoned. And I knew that this was only the beginning, the first chapter of countless days where I could live fully, without apology, without fear, without compromise. And as I approached the quiet edge of the city, where the streets opened to the river, I paused to watch the water flow gently, reflecting the fading light like liquid gold. And I thought of all the possibilities that stretched before me, the adventures waiting to be taken, the stories waiting to be written, the people waiting to be met. And I felt a sense of anticipation so profound it was almost tangible, like electricity in the air, ready to ignite the next chapter of my life. The river flowed steadily, as if carrying away the remnants of fear and doubt, the fragments of expectation, the weight of others' opinions, leaving me lighter, freer, ready to embrace the unknown. And I knew that choosing myself had not been easy, not without guilt, not without resistance, but it had been necessary, essential.
If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Every single subscription motivates me to bring you even more exciting and dramatic HOA stories. And don't forget to tap the bell icon so you never miss a new upload. I'll see you in the next story, where justice gets even more satisfying.